Which one did we pick?
We picked volume and intensity.
Oh, money.
Yeah. So I want to talk about these two concepts because I think they're important. I think they're often misunderstood and misapplied. People,
I think they're misapplied. They're maybe not misunderstood as much.
I don't know. I think I'd argue with you.
Remember, we had that discussion about what intensity is.
Yeah.
What calls intensity same thing as load.
Oh, yeah. You and I had disagreement on what define it. Okay, yeah.
So,
for sure.
So volume and intensity as programming variables and how to apply them, where they show up, and again, maybe some misunderstandings and misapplication, but talk about those things and how to manage them appropriately. We can talk obviously about how they've kind of fit into our programs a little bit, but the whole, the people that understand volume and intensity the most generally, and again, I'm not saying they understand it at a deep level, I don't know. Like, this is in general. The people that did a really good job with this are, one, the Eastern Europeans, when it comes to strength and power training, particularly the Olympic lifting and the powerlifting athletes.
Old Russia, making all those
back in the 80s,
rocked up dudes.
Yeah, back in the 70s and 80s, they figured it out. I mean, when you go to some of the literature and some of the texts, like, it almost all links back to that. And the other guys that do a really good job with this are the bodybuilders. Yep. Those that truly perform and compete at a professional level, understand volume and intensity in their programming, and they have to in order to continue to get gains. And so when you look at some of these guys, like particularly, again, going back to like the Olympic lifting side of things, look at the Bulgarians, the Romanians, the Russians, and the Germans there for a long time too, the, Eastern side of the wall, more specifically with all the things they were doing. And let's be honest, let's be upfront with this. Like, it was programming, it was how it was programmed. There were certainly PEDs involved there, but and it's always going to be the case in a lot of those things. But the bottom line is they figured it out. How do you get this 120 kilo guy, right, or 100 kilo dude to put up 400, like 200 kilos over his head from the floor on a barbell? Like, it just seems physically impossible when you're looking at the guy's stature, And they were able to do this. They're able to do this consistently. China's done a really good job with it too. If you look at those Olympic lifters, they're excellent. My point of that is volume, intensity. How does it fit in, and how do we manage it to be successful both in the short and the long term?
We have to define it first.
Yeah, let's define it. So let's talk about volume.
Volume in short is reps. Is the amount of reps you're doing across a workout, across a week, across a block, all of those things. So
total work that gets done.
Across a defined time period.
Yes. Right? So, like, if you looked at this in even simpler terms, over the course of the year, how many reps did you do, right? And so it's the total amount of work, right? The work that you did, hard stop, right?
I agree with that statement.
All right. Versus intensity.
Finally.
Might be the only one.
Versus intensity.
Intensity is how hard something is.
Okay. And so obviously that...
Would you agree with that?
How hard something is, or how hard you try to do something is what I would define it.
I mean, those kind of sound the same. But really, it's that can be subjective and objective.
Yeah, you can go off RPE, just rate of perceived exertion, or you can actually go of like, is this overtaxing? Are you doing too much in this period?
So again, objective and subjective measurements on the intensity side of things. On the volume side of things, and we said reps.
Very quantitative.
It's quantitative. It could be mileage.
Yeah,
it could be yardage.
It's easy to measure.
Right. It could be yardage. It's that total again, amount of work at whatever you're measuring, whatever your goal is. So again, versus the intensity, which is the effort that's being put into the reps that you do, the mileage that you put in, the yardage that you do in the pool, whatever it happens to be. So in simple terms, it's kind of easy to understand those things. What isn't so simple, and where I see it being misapplied, is how much volume and how much intensity, and how do those things interplay as you put things together.
So do you think... Scott's out of this conversation now. He's just here to just make sure we don't come to blows.
Yeah, ready to go.
I boxed, so I'm just kidding. So so volume and intensity are two separate concepts you can train in my mind. Do you think it should be like, if you had to split it, and you could define whoever it is for, we could pick a person to define it about, but like, should it be an even split? Is it 70-30? Does it change throughout the year? Like, how does that work like, how do you think it works? And maybe you should pick a person, we can discuss that person. Like, is it a college athlete?
Let's just go with college athlete.
Okay, college athlete playing football.
So yeah, it is undulating depending on time of the year. So off season time. So let's go football player.
So define, because we haven't done undulating. So define
undulating is it goes in waves. Okay. So high intensity, low intensity, moderate, all that. It just alternates up and down, back and forth, depending on time of, it could be over a cycle, could be over a course of a year.
Versus periodization, which is
a linear periodization would be it's going in one direction, peaking towards some specific thing. So
I'm actually saying define the amount of volume, how volume and intensity play with each other for that person, not just intensity.
So I get that, and I'm going to jump in here and say, yeah, but you got to do what he just did there and talk about, because he said undulating versus periodized or linear periodization, and how programs are put together, because it absolutely impacts volume and intensity and how you apply those variables in that programming.
So volume as intensity, well, more so the volume and load connection is more. The intensity can kind of go back and forth depending on either of those two. So load is the amount of weight used. As the load goes up, volume should go down.
Intensity.
And then
volume will go down. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then as
intensity increases,
intensity will increase.
Volume generally decreases.
Yes.
Okay.
Now you can still have a very intense workout where it's low weight, high reps, bodybuilding.
Yep.
For example, those are very intense workouts for those competitors. But a lot of it is, most of the time, it's opposite ends of the spectrum. Lower weight, higher reps, or higher weight, lower reps. The intensity is kind of modified in there depending on the day.
Right. Got it.
Does that kind of cover what you're wanting?
Yeah, that's come on. I'm trying to define it. Because I know we kind of define volume and intensity not a little bit differently for certain things, only because I come from a CrossFit background. Mm-hmm. So they delved into it pretty heavily, because there was always two fields of camps of during our season. I consider personally that volume was very important in the beginning of the season to get as much as I could in and to build a solid base.
Right.
Because what am I training for? I'm training for the CrossFit Games, which is 5 days of 14 workouts across 5 days. So I have to have volume, because if I've only done one workout a day for my entire career and they were super intense, I want to suck when I get to the CrossFit Games because I can't do more than one a day.
Yep.
Intense, right? So I have to have a good volume intensity. But then as I got closer to the culmination, or as the season increased and got further down the road, then I have to add and spike the intensity, and then also decrease the volume a little bit. But I'm trying to keep it pretty high as much as I can, because I'm trying to match what I would see at the CrossFit Games.
Right. Yeah, I love that, because what you said there that really stands out is the volume builds a certain level of conditioning and a base to then build the intensity on top of.
You had the capacity to last those 14 workouts across the week.
Right. Yeah. So another very specific thing about CrossFit is you're doing 2 workouts a day, and you're trying to divide up, maybe one's a skill session.
4.
Yeah, whatever happens.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about your training program now as it relates to tactical games and how much time you're spending in certain things. And as we're ramping up for nationals, which as we're recording this is a week away or 2 weeks away?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Something like that. The intensity starts to ramp up in certain aspects. We won't give away the secret sauce there, but they start to.
I put all my training for. I don't have anything to hide.
We start to put in certain more intensity into certain areas, and so people can relate to this. If you're like a triathlete, right? There's lots of volume of training that happens over the course of the year. As you get close to your season, the volume of training tends to decrease a little bit, and you're doing more sprints, more interval type work, more hill training, like with your running, or more sprint work in the pool, those kind of things, to build both capacity and your ability to endure the event when you get there. And you're building that on top of your base.
Yeah, you've logged all these miles as a baseline, so your body knows what a marathon feels like to run.
So the answer isn't as you get closer to the triathlon, run, bike, and swim more. It means have more intensity in the running, biking, and swimming that you're actually doing. Which means if you're going to add more intensity, you generally have to make sure you're really managing your recovery and your rest time. And recovery involves a lot of things: sleep, nutrition, just rest in between. Obviously, how you're programming so you're not overdoing certain things. And that's what the periodized training gives you an advantage there to really program and know when my higher volume versus my higher intensity workouts kind of line up. I can build into it, versus the undulating program, going back to those terms, where I'm trying to manage it all the time.
Right.
Because I have to be ready in our subgroup or population here, being law enforcement, team guys, whatever. I got to be ready at a moment's notice. There is no seasonality to this.
You can't peak up. You can't decrease the volume, increase the intensity. You can't tailor it to a specific, like what we were talking about offline, of a calendar event.
Yeah, but and that doesn't necessarily mean you can't have a focus for something like in this period of time for this 10-week, 12-week, 14, whatever we're doing there, block, we can't focus more on strength. In fact, we do that.
Absolutely.
We absolutely do that. Or speed and power or capacity. Like that's part of the undulating program. It's just not, we're not doing that for we're not doing that for 8 months to then build this intensity piece, for 2 months to then build, a recovery period of 2 months to then jump back into the higher volume training. That's the tug of war that happens when you're programming for an athlete that has to be ready at a moment's notice all the time, is balancing all those things. So
what about let's go in this discussion. So volume versus intensity, like obviously you can be binary and you can just choose to be really good at one
100%.
and suck at the other one. And that's what I see a lot of. And I'll make this argument, and you might disagree with me. I don't think you actually will. Is if you have to choose one that's more important than the other, which one would you choose?
Volume.
What?
I go volume.
What? Are you serious? Okay, I actually disagree with that on that. Yeah. So if you have to choose volume over intensity, then what you're saying is, I can do a lot of stuff, but I can't do anything really 100%. That's how I view that. Yeah. Where the opposite, whereas I would say, I would rather be able to do something really freaking good, but I just kind of like peter off over time because I can't keep up with the volume.
I'm going to say this. I think I know where Aaron's going with this, and I think I'm going to agree with him, but I'm going to let him respond.
Well, you know what? All right, hit me with it.
It's going to be on a 2-on-1 here.
So I think volume, because of more, I'm thinking of just reps. You can apply it to skill training. You can apply it to just consistency pieces. If you're getting a lot of reps, it may not be perfect all the time, but you're getting those reps on reps on reps, and you're accumulating a very large depth of work. Versus maybe you do one really intense workout and never train again for a month. You do one really intense workout, your intensity may be way up here.
This would be such a really good, if you could like figure out a way of like baselining it and then testing it out. You know what I'm trying to say? That would be so, I'm sure someone's done it.
No, that's one of the challenges in the population that we work with, is those standards don't exist. Like, what exactly do they need, right? And IEP's done a really good job of identifying the foundational pieces of that. But again, every team runs a different op tempo. They do different things. They're part-time, full-time. They're in urban environments versus rural environments. There's lots of different components that come into it.
The intensity is going up, it's going down, but as long as they're staying consistent, I would say that's where my argument with the volume comes in.
So my coming over the top with the intensity piece is also recognizing that these athletes, being these law enforcement officers, they have a lot of other things that could be that accumulate on top of the intensity. So in this case, I should more say, so going back to the volume, on top of the volume of work that they're doing, they might also be working a 24-hour shift on a call out or something like that, where the managing the recovery from the intensity becomes problematic. And so going back to the volume, if I had to weight it a little more, I think I'm going to agree with Aaron on that. I'm not as confident as I was initially. Now that I'm saying it out loud, but no, I'm going to stick with that there's certain things that need to get done, and I would rather sacrifice intensity for the volume of getting all of the things done that's keeping them skilled and at a certain capacity level to be able to handle those things. And that way they have that base to then, when op tempos decrease, or, they're managing their sleep better and their nutrition better, they can ramp up the intensity piece to that balance, for a balance, right? So I think in the technical sense, like that's the direction I would go to. But you seem to
changing.
Highly disagree. So give us some rationale.
So rationale wise, like my thought is, again, you guys are coming from the law enforcement perspective, which I understand this is a podcast about law enforcement, but I'm coming from my personal perspective of like, when I competed, I did a crap ton of volume when I started, because I thought, number one, I was trying to play catch up in a sport. Like, so if Aaron joins tactical games tomorrow, and let's say he has no experience in firearms and no experience in fitness. Well, in order to get there, he has to do a crap ton of volume to catch up, right? And so that's what I did in the sport was I put a crap ton of volume in to catch up. But then when I realized later in is like, that's great, but when I get there and I can do everything everyone else can, but the problem is I can't actually put in the work in terms of like giving RPE of 10 because I don't know what 10 feels like. Because my 10 is a 7 for you.
I'm with you.
Like that was hard for me. Now I understand like I'm making the argument for both here where volume to catch up in the beginning was important and then intensity later on in an athletic career. So maybe I'm switching my stance from now. If I'm looking at a professional athlete, maybe in the beginning of a professional athlete's career or a person who's trying to become a professional athlete, that volume might be more important and then it might shift later in the career to being more intensity.
It can because you built that base.
Yeah.
That right there, yeah. You got a foundation.
You got the foundation and you have the base to build the intensity on top of. And so actually you just made a really good point. And that is depending on where you're coming into this. So maybe you had in your past a lot of volume and intensity and you were an advanced athlete at some level. You played college sports and then you became a professional, right? You became a professional law enforcement officer. The priorities change, right? The things change. You went through the academy and it was very much based around endurance, right? With the running and the pull-ups and the sit-ups and the push-ups and the calisthenics and things like that. And then you got on the job and you had to go through your FDO program and you're working late shifts and you're adjusting to this and your fitness kind of goes away. You lose that base. So where you're coming back into it, you really need to build back in that volume in order to build that base to be building the intensity on. And then as you build that in, once you've got that base, then those variables can be adjusted at the intensity level a little bit more. I'm not saying intensity is not important. It's absolutely important.
Yeah, I like sometimes it's fun to pick it and prioritize. So I'm going to give Aaron the W for this argument, even though he just sat there and said it and just let me argue my way to his position over time.
Silence is the best option.
He just like, come on, Jacob, come meet me over here.
No, I love that. But this is also coming from, in my opinion, like affectionately, like Mr. Intensity here, right? Like
so actually, if you go back and Google it, there is multiple articles on me in CrossFit being the king of volume in the sport.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was known for.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Now you can go back and Google it.
But when I think of you, knowing you personally, right, and knowing how you operate in life.
It's shifted now where it's like, I don't need to go put in a bunch of mileage on a barbell or a sandbag or running because I put that mileage in.
Right.
Now it's like, well, I need to come in here and hit one good workout with Aaron this morning, hit it really hard and then be done.
You're good. Yeah. Right. And that's the goal. Right. That would be the goal, is to get people to that point. But the reality of it is you're working with a very mixed population from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I would say the majority of that spectrum lies in they probably need a little bit more volume in places.
Right.
Maybe it's less volume in the strength training and more volume. Most likely, this is what our data tells us. They need more volume in the speed and power components.
Which is why we built what we built with the assessment, giving an evaluation, a calculated evaluation based off of their numbers of what they need to work on. And then we have those 3 static programs, speed and power, strength, capacity, all built towards building volume in that particular skill. And then eventually you can, quote unquote, graduate to the performance program so you have that base and then you can rely on that base and focus on other things.
Yeah, and then we're very carefully managing it, obviously in those 3 static programs that you just mentioned, but also in the performance track, very carefully managing volume, intensity across those domains as you get in there. And again, that's largely based on, hey, we want you to be set up for success when you get into that. So if you're entering into the performance program and you don't have a lot of volume on the strength side of things, man, I'm not saying you can't do it. Like, I'm just saying you're probably gonna be better set up if you spent a 10-week block doing some higher volume in the strength programming. That way it sets you up to be ready to accept what it is that we're providing for you in that program or in the performance track. So again, like volume, intensity, and we talk about like misapplication. It is very specific to the athlete, right? And what it is that you're doing. You're talking about seasonality, something to keep in mind. Like, if you're not a seasonal athlete, like, how do you put your program together to make it all work for you? And so we also, going back to needs versus wants, one of the things is like, we get that people still like, when you said like where I see people going.
Yeah.
Like when I talk to these guys, like, there's usually not a lack of strength training, right? There's usually not a lack of strength training. If you've made the proverbial SWAT team, you've been around the weight room, right? It's part of the culture, and it is absolutely a necessary part of the job. Strength matters. It's the baseline for how we're going to express things going forward. But oftentimes we see that's where the majority of the work is being put in, and there isn't volume. There's volume and intensity there, but probably some of that volume could be taken out, and you could still maintain intensity in your strength training programs with less volume, right? And put some of that volume, again, reps, time, right, into speed and power and capacity to build on that base that you have. I mean, you're jacked, great. But what is this? How are you performing in these other domains? And so again, that's where you don't take volume out of your program, you move it. Right? You don't take intensity out of the program, you adjust it. And those things, that's what coaching is. That's what specific programming for specific jobs, roles, or athletes is knowing where and when that should be programmed. And we try to educate people on how to kind of make those decisions on your own. But you got to have a base level foundation of kind of understanding what it is. And then also it's kind of like trusting the process that if I pull some of that volume out of your strength training, it doesn't mean you're going to get small and weak. Right? Because if we adjust the intensity properly, you might actually get stronger by taking some volume out and bigger, right? If that's what your goal, if that's what you want to look better in this medium shirt, right? You might actually get bigger muscles through doing less volume, more intensity. Yep. I got to tell you, when I saw the best gains, right, in my life was when I decreased the volume and I increased the intensity by going from a 5 to 6 day a week program to a 4 day a week program with my strength training, right? So I took some volume out. I increased intensity on those days. And I gave myself longer recovery periods to then go and hit the things again. And I was still doing very much a body part split. But man, I was gaining big time, like scary gains for me, and that was. So it was a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday workout. I took the weekends off. I always like to be active, so I would go out, maybe surf or hike or, get on my bike. I always riding my bike, getting on my mountain bike or even my road bike and getting out there and do things. And having that, I always wanted to be able to I know if I needed to run a mile, I could still run a mile. Yeah. So maybe I'd do that on the weekends or whatever. The point is knowing how to make those variables work for you in a good way and not being afraid of, again, moving things or shifting focuses from one to another. And again, being afraid that you're going to somehow lose all your strength or lose all your muscle by doing that. For the most part, most people that are at this point in their journey, again, for those team guys, even if you literally took a few weeks off of strength training, right? You're not going to lose your strength. Science tells us it's going to hang around for
the last 30 days.
Yeah, 3 to 5 weeks, right? It's going to maybe feel heavy, after 3 weeks when you get underneath that bar again and it'll feel heavy. But you have the neural capacity. Your body has not completely flipped on its head and you're going to lose it all. On the endurance side of things, much different. Take 3 days off and tell me how you feel sometimes, right? If you're one of those distance runners, that's why they're afraid to stop doing the volume. But maybe if they had a little bit more strength and a little bit more power, right? They'd be faster.
More efficient in their movements.
All of those things. So volume, intensity, knowing how to program it in. We've taken care of all that business for you. That's what we nerd out on. And that's what's gone in there when you look across those static programs and also on the performance track and the way that looks. And it also goes into our team training program and being able to, assess kind of where we need to put the focus right now. And generally, based on what we just said, it's probably going to start with a little higher amount of volume before we start ramping into the intensity. How fast? Look, we mentioned the static programs are about 10 weeks. Right? That's a good amount of time to achieve the adaptations that need to be achieved in terms of increasing neural drive, increasing tissue quality, prepping you, finding those movement patterns and the ranges of motion that need to be achieved in order to continue to advance. We took all that thinking out of it for you. Obviously, there's an individual doing this, so there may be some specifics that need to be addressed. But that's a great part of the program is there's flexibility in it. We recognize as much as we've tried to build a one size fits all, we also are we're acutely aware that there's no such thing.
Yep.
So that's why there's this variation. So when people are looking at like, I'm kind of confused, what should I do? That's what the assessment's for. Like we try to give you the best direction we can. If you're still not sure, freaking reach out. Yep. Like reach out. Or if you've gotten yourself into a program, you're like, I think this is the wrong program for me. Well,
reach out.
Yeah, reach out. Let's talk about it.
Go too deep into it.
The last thing we want is you getting the wrong program for you, but let's assess what wrong is and how do we make it right.